Welcome to another edition of Fastcast. Today we will be interviewing Joy Colucci, owner and CEO of Metis Technology Solutions. Joy will talk about her experiences in submitting a NASA SBIR proposal, managing the proposal process, and discuss some important things to know about being an SBIR awardee.
Alrighty folks, thank you for joining us on another edition of our Fastcast. Today we are joined by Joy Colucci, CEO and owner of Metis Technology. And Joy's going to talk about the NASA SBIR process and her own experiences for going through that. Joy, if you could take a couple seconds, 30 seconds to a minute, and introduce yourself and Metis, please.
Sure, Dal. I have been associated with NASA for many, many years. I started my career as a NASA-funded scientist back in the mid-'80s, and I became a NASA contractor and program manager working on very large NASA R&D contracts for companies such as Raytheon and Booz Allen Hamilton prior to starting Metis Technology Solutions about 7 years ago. So we are a small business headquartered here in Albuquerque. We've got offices at two of the NASA research centers as well, Ames Research Center in Mountain View, California, and Langley Research Center in Hampton, Virginia. And we've currently got about 90 employees. Maybe 30% of them at this point are working on U.S. Air Force contracts here at Kirtland Air Force Base. So although we started as a NASA contractor, we've been able to leverage the capabilities in systems and software engineering that we gained supporting NASA into the Air Force market.
That's actually great, being able to show that, transition and that movement along the processes, and kind of gives people something to hope for. We hope that it gives them something to hope for.
Well, yeah, and absolutely. The move to Albuquerque has been fantastic because we've received a lot of support from groups such as yours and the SBA, and a lot of the work being done at Kirtland in areas such as small satellite development and satellite ground systems is very similar to the work that we do at NASA. So that worked out very well.
Well, we thank you for the little shout out there. It's always great to hear that what we're doing is actually effective, and we're effectively helping small businesses in New Mexico.
Absolutely.
So we're going to actually run through a couple of questions here to give to our listening audience and kind of tell them about things they need to know about the NASA SBIR process. So our first question is, what is the most difficult aspect in preparing a NASA SBIR proposal, and how did Metis overcome it?
Well, the proposal process itself is not too difficult. As I said, Metis started as a government service provider supporting the agency with engineering services. So we already understood the development of cost proposals, all the elements of cost, including indirect rates and terms and conditions for NASA contracts. So plus, Dell, we had developed huge proposals for engineering services contracts that comprise hundreds of pages and several volumes. So the SBIR proposals themselves are relatively short. For phase one, it's a 20-page proposal, and the process of actually putting the proposal together was relatively simple for us. What was much more involved and time-consuming is the concept development process that precedes putting the actual proposal together. Mm-hmm. So our engineers who are interested in participating with the SBIR process actually spend a lot of time brainstorming their ideas, and that front end of the proposal process was really the most difficult. And if I had to pick the most challenging aspect of that, from our perspective, it would be finding the customers associated with the subtopics that we were interested in and that we had ideas pertaining to those subtopics. It's been sometimes very challenging to find the appropriate program managers within the agency and to get in front of them and sell your ideas prior to submitting the actual proposal. I've been involved in a lot of your forums, and we've discussed how important that is. If you're proposing cold without interaction with the customer, your probability of winning actually does go way down. So, at this point, we're trying to take some of our NASA technologies and sell them to Navy and Air Force. And it has been really challenging and difficult for us to try to find the program managers and take the time to get to know them and have them understand our company's capabilities and the ideas that we'd like to sell in the SBIR proposals. So I would say that's really been the most difficult part of the process, as opposed to putting the actual proposal together.
Okay. So if you had to ballpark a figure, I know that Metis had previously done a lot of contracts, and I am unfortunately familiar with doing large scale contracts with Navy outside of a SBIR and exactly how many pages that requires. But taking into account the difficult aspect of working all the front end things there that you had mentioned, if you had to ballpark a figure, how many man hours do you think it actually took you to submit your first NASA SBIR? And what was the one thing that proved to be the biggest hurdle for effectively managing that time, and, the biggest actually positive impact that you had for effectively managing it?
Well, I would ballpark the figure between 200 and 300 hours, taking into account all of those brainstorming sessions. And for us, the engineers that we had working on these proposals had day jobs at NASA. And so they were working primarily in a group, brainstorming ideas and concepts after school, after working hours. We had sessions in our Sunnyvale office where 4 or 5 of our NASA engineers at Ames Research Center got together. And I think this was probably over a 2 to 3 week period. And they would work as a group brainstorming ideas. And then we had another principal investigator on the East Coast where we now have a software development lab. And he was working primarily on his own at home after hours. And then we would set up calls after hours to go through iterations on the ideas that they were generating. So, there was a lot of sacrifice really on the part of our PIs and their teams to get that part of the process underway outside of regular working hours, which is very important. You can't really mix church and state, as it were, when you're doing SBIR. That has to be on your own corporate facilities, equipment, and that was really the biggest hurdle. But, we had people who were really excited about the process and the potential for being PIs and getting their own great ideas out there and funded, and they were willing to make that sacrifice and make it happen.
Gotcha. And you brought up something in there that I think is extremely interesting and kind of important for people to remember, is that no matter what, there is always going to be some of that front end work. The likelihood you are going to find a topic that is a 1-to-1 match for your innovation or technology is stupidly small. There's almost always going to have to be some reconfigure, some component, and some broader ways to think about your innovation and how it possibly fits into that envelope. And what do you have to really change about what you're doing? And is it a large change? Is it a small change? And how does that affect the entire SBIR proposal process? But not only the proposal process, if you win, how does that actually affect your performance, your period of performance, your evaluation on it? All those aspects do take quite a bit of planning.
That's true, especially the resource planning. I mean, it does get easier in phase 2 because at that point you have enough money where you can have dedicated resources on the project. But, there's a lot of shuffling and juggling around of resources during phase 1 because it's a very short period of time, and there's not really that much funding associated with it since it's primarily proof of concept. And so getting enough done to really be credible in phase 2 in that short amount of time does take a lot of planning and careful resource management.
Definitely. So I know that, you've spoken, and METIS is almost beyond the SBIR process now and the proposal process. You're working in large-scale contracts, but if given the opportunity, if something just seemed like such a fit for METIS and the direction that y'all are taking the company, would you go after future NASA SBIR proposals, and why or why not?
Well, absolutely. And in fact, we started on services contracts prior to bidding on SBIRs. So we're coming at this from maybe a unique perspective because we didn't start out as a SBIR's contractor. We started out as a services contractor. And then we had engineers working on missions at Ames who had ideas that were relevant to SBIR's topic. So we would absolutely continue to bid on new phase 1s and to try to get, we're right now waiting for a phase 2 award on a previous phase 1 to build hardware for the International Space Station. And,
very nice.
We're keeping our fingers crossed on that one. But we continue to have engineers with really good and relevant ideas for the SBIRs and the subtopics that NASA has described. And, as we continue to provide engineering services, we continue to have insight into what the mission needs are for NASA. So our intent is to keep this up and to branch out into other agencies. It's very good for us, I think, as a services provider, to have an internal research and development effort. I think it really sets us apart from other services providers competitively. And it's really good for the company and the individuals to have that potential for commercialization. We've filed our first patents. And as a company and the owner of METIS, it's been really important to me to set up very generous royalty sharing agreements with our employees who are principal investigators and inventors, so that if we eventually commercialize the technology, they have a huge stake in that success.
That's actually wonderful. And it's something that a lot of people don't really think of, is that future and forward planning, particularly when you think of the commercialization, is those are all aspects that really need to be thought of before you even approach a SBIR.
Yeah, and for me, that was something that I didn't have previous experience with, was the intellectual property legalities. So we found a very good IP attorney here in Albuquerque, and she's really helped us navigate that process.
Gotcha. So we've talked about quite a bit here in our little interview. If you could leave our audience with kind of one crystallizing point, what do you think is the most important piece of knowledge they need to distill from this interview?
Well, for me and for METIS, really for the SBIR process, the most important thing to our success has been getting in front of the customers early in the process and really understanding their needs at a level that is a little deeper than what's published in the subtopic, and to make sure that our technologies are aligning with those needs. And so it's really the upfront work that's required to be successful that I'd like people to have an appreciation for. If you're looking at subtopics and are putting in a proposal without really having the due diligence taken care of and understanding the customer and their needs, then I think you're going to have a tougher time of it.
It kind of reminds me of the old adage with businesses: you have to spend money to make money. So you have to actually invest resources to get in resources from one of these programs.
Yeah, that's right. And currently we're trying to take some of our NASA technologies to Navy and Air Force. And, we have passed on opportunities to submit proposals because we haven't yet made that customer connection. And I just feel that it would be a waste of time until we get that done. So that's really, I think, my biggest lesson learned and the takeaway for this interview.
Gotcha. Well, Joy, we greatly thank you for taking time out of your day to sit down and talk to our clients and talk to our listening audience, our viewing audience, about the NASA SBIR and the kind of viewpoint that you and Metis have about the entire process and what's important. And we definitely wish you luck in your phase 2s. And as always, if there's anything we can do to assist you, please let us know.
I certainly will. And Del, thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. And it was fun. We'll have to do it again sometime.
We are always up to talking to our clients and, kind of doing these real quick interviews and seeing where you are. And, is there any information you can impart to that first time proposer that just gets entirely overwhelmed by the situation they find themselves in? And I have actually been on the other end of that and at that 3 a.m. deadline mark going, oh God, I got to submit this and I know it's bad. So
submit the day before it's due at least, because you may have system issues.
Oh yeah. Well, that's what we always try to tell people. Well, Joy, thank you again. And we greatly appreciate it. Again, good luck and we hope to talk to you soon.
Thanks, Del. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.